This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Okay, hello everybody. We'll get started here shortly. And Santino, I just sent you the co-host. You got it. All right. So yeah, we'll get started here shortly. We're gonna get a few more people in here, and then of course Alpha Warrior, and we'll get started. How are you, Santino?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Jenny?
I'm great. Where the hell were you for Rubber Ducks podcast a minute ago over there in Telegram? It was freaking hilarious and it was awesome.
I missed it. I didn't get the prompt, the notification for it. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it was live in Telegram, so I don't know that. Yeah, they don't. I don't think they do notifications like that. But I sent out the lineup, and did you not see it? The show lineup?
I don't think I saw it. I'm sorry.
Oh, you fired. I'm kidding.
I know. Just because I go back and forth every day. I go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, like every minute, right? And I just missed it.
You're good. You're good. Well, you're here now.
I'm here.
Yep. So we'll wait everybody for Alpha to get in here. A couple more people. But I am gonna let everybody know here real quickly. Let me get my studio here started real quick. If you don't know who I am, which probably many of you do, I'm going to do my little PSAs here real quickly, everybody, because I want everybody to know that it's me. It's really me. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Revival of America podcast. I am Jenny. I'm the owner and the host of the Revival of America. Today, we have Alpha Warrior in the house. So, everybody, if you have a question for Alpha when he gets in here, please request a mic. Myself or Santino will open up your mic and you guys can answer or ask him a question. Also, too, I want to let everybody know that please be careful who you follow, who you're listening to, and what you're putting in your mind, because there's a lot of crazy stuff being said out there right now. A lot of black pilling, doom and gloom, and just we're really winning a lot. A lot of positive things are happening. So I highly suggest you guys hang on to that positive and keep pushing forward because things are happening in our favor. We've been screaming from the rooftops for a long time for this stuff to happen, and it's finally here. We're actually finally starting to see some vindication. I know Derek Johnson's getting a lot of vindication right now, so I'm very proud of him on that. Also, too, we're seeing this Q movement fall right into place. It's been the Q movement's been a lot about giving us crumbs. We go research and we become those self thinkers, right? So everybody, just hang in there. It's coming to fruition. We are going to have some bumpy times, I do believe, but just hang in there. Hang on to those positive wins, however big or small they are. But just hang on to those, and obviously stay right with God. Eyes on God, everybody, because at the end of the day, this is God's war, and He's already won it. And what a beautiful thing. A lot of people are missing, as they stay in this infighting bullshit, infiltrating stuff. And that we're going to talk about a little bit about that today as well. So also to everybody, we are being listened to in over 100 countries. So if you come into this podcast late, or if you want to share it with family and friends, you can follow the podcast on the podcast hosts, which are iHeartRadio, Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Google, Breaker, Pocket Cast, Podbean, Riverside, Amazon Music. Also, too, my social medias, I put everything over there. They're all verified except for True Social and YouTube right now. And I think that's it. So you can go follow those at Jenny Dreed Facebook, at Jenny_Dreed X, at J Dreed Rumble, at J Dreed True Social, at J Dreed Instagram, the Revival of America YouTube, the Revival of America Telegram, and then of course TikTok, and that is at the official J Dreed. So everybody, please just know that myself or any of us out here speaking to you, trying to give you the truth, we will not randomly reach out to you and ask you if you're, ready for any kind of event. So please, everybody, block those people, report them, let us know so we can make sure that they are not here in our chats trying to cause up shit, because that's what they do. So with that, everybody, I see Alpha is in the house. Actually, Alpha, I'm gonna do you a co-host. So, what's up, my friend, Muscle Man?
Well, what's up, fam? Oh, I just got the request, so it went away.
Oh,
Oh,
let me
there
get
it
it.
is.
You get it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I tried to take it the first time, but it kicked me from the space. But I think it's working now.
It's quick. It's quick. And everybody, too, if you guys don't mind reposting the space, get more people in here, because I really would like a lot of my audience and many of you guys to listen to Alpha. He's breaking it down. I mean, all of us really are, and we're breaking it down in different ways, but he really he's coming out, and he's talking about, he's probably got one of the best explanations that I've heard. And I know I've talked to Captain Kyle and his assistant Kelly, which I see she's in here. Hi, Kelly. He's just broken down the Israel situation, like, just probably, like I said, one of the best ways I've ever heard it. So, Alpha, I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, and also too the infiltration and what we're dealing with that, and these said Trump supporters, and now they're coming out and calling them antichrist, Zionists, and all that kind of stuff. So, everybody, if you're not following Alpha, please do that. He is giving us a lot of great information, and he's solid. He's calm, cool, and collected. If you don't know who he is or haven't heard him speak, you're going to be in for a pleasant surprise. So, with that, Alpha, why don't you take it away and kind of just talk to us a little bit? Let's start with this infiltration bullshit that we're dealing with, because I know you've been dealing with it, a lot of it. And it's unfortunate that people have to be that way, and kind of, I know they brought in some of your family into it. So yeah, if you want to talk about that, and then we can go into the Israel thing, I think that'd be awesome.
No, absolutely. First, let me start off by letting your audiences that are listening on all the different platforms know that I appreciate their time. Time is the currency that you don't get back. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so, for those that are giving us their time right now to hear our information, I just want to let you know that I appreciate it. As well, you guys, make sure you're following Jenny. Make sure you're following Santino. Just a great patriotic woman and a great patriotic man. And one of the two things that I like about both of these people is they venture out into spaces that are not echo chambers. And if we want to have a collective impact on this information war, that's what it's going to entail. And a lot of times people are like, why are you giving that person a voice? And why are you giving that person a voice? It's and if you just allow me, Jenny, to kind of just touch on this, because I want to make
Of
sure
course.
people understand this, because things are going to get accelerated over the next 8 weeks. And social media it's been a blaze. This thing's about to shift into an inferno. And I want to make sure that people understand, as a host and a co-host, it's very delicate, the threshold of allowing someone to provide information and you know just straight out censorship. It's there's a difference. Now, a lot of us recognize certain people that are on here as disruptors. We recognize people that are on here just to troll. But we also got to remember that there are a lot every day. You're talking about tens of thousands of new legitimate profiles being brought to this platform outside of the bots and the sock accounts. And so with that, these people don't necessarily know a lot of the stuff that many of you for the last year, 4 years, or 8 years of this platform are aware of. And we're only as strong as our weakest link, and that applies to information war as well. So make sure you give these guys some leeway when you see them in these different spaces. Um, Now, as far would you rather me start with the infiltration part first, Jenny, or where do you want me to start off first?
Well, I think we can kind of end out with that, but because I really want you to kind of talk a little bit about the Israel thing too, focus on that a lot, because I think a lot of people are confused on that and how that's all kind of playing out. I know you've talked about a lot about the Houthis, and just kind of, you just have such a great explanation of it, and it makes it a little bit easier for maybe people to understand that are not quite getting it. So if you want to start there, and then we can go into the infiltration.
Yeah, 100%. So let me start off with just establishing the baseline, because I'm sure it won't be long before you see people in the comments that they want to box me into one position, and what makes it so frustrating for them is I don't allow them to. And one of the reasons I don't allow them to is because no matter how great they think their scripts are, no matter how great they think their briefings and meetings are outside of this platform, I'm better at it than them, and that frustrates them a lot. So here are the foundations of where I stand. I am not pro Palestine. I'm not pro Israel. I am pro one thing, and that is America. Now, after pro America, obviously I care about humanity as well. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus Christ, Yahweh, whatever name you want to give him, that I believe in God and in Christ. I believe that Christ is the Son of God, and I also believe that there's one and the same at the same time. One of because that's been trying to be taken out of context. That being said, I also understand that just like our science books and our math books and our history books, the Bible's been manipulated just like everything else. However, that being said, I also know that the Bible is the only book in the history of man that's ever been referred to as the living word. And if you allow your discernment, if you allow that internal compass that's in you to have that direct connect with God, it doesn't matter what manipulation has happened to those words, whatever message you intend to receive from your creator, you will receive it. That said, I believe fundamentally that there is a distinction between governments and people. That said, I believe that every religion has good people in it and has extremists in it. That said, I believe that all of these governments, even though for the last decades we've been told that this is the enemy of this one and this is the ally of this one, that they all fall under one large Operation Gladio umbrella and that they work in collaboration, whether they know or they don't know, they are working in collaboration by that top 1% of the 1% that wants to push us into a new world order. So just have that as the basic understanding of where I am coming from as I push through this conversation. So Israel, when you see a lot of people bring up Israel, you won't always just hear them say Israel. Typically, you'll hear them come out with the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. And part of the reason, and this will go into the latter half of this conversation, is because I believe there is a division that's trying to be sowed, and I'll address that later. But people need to understand that one, I absolutely agree that the Israeli government, Mossad, um, the intel agencies have infiltrated our US government for far longer than I've been alive. But they're not the only ones. And this is where my path splits from a lot of the actors that are on this platform that only want you to believe that Israel's the only one that's infiltrated our government. The Communist Party of China has infiltrated our government. The private organizations have infiltrated our government. Obviously, Big Pharma has infiltrated our government and the military industrial complex, even though it's a part of our government, the private sector behind it that funds it and those that benefit from it, the central bankers, et cetera, have infiltrated our government. So you have all of these segments of Operation Gladio that are trying to push our government in the direction they want. At times, these different factions work hand in hand because it puts them in the direction that they want. And at times, there's even infighting within these factions. At the end of the day, The American people and the populations of other countries are the ones that suffer from this. So when people say, well, we just need to cut ties from Israel, that is the goal, but that's not the goal right now. And one of the reasons why, and a lot of people haven't paid attention to this, is the vast majority of our infrastructure is relying on technology and software that was either created or in part developed from Israel. And the one thing we've learned is that when these software programs and these tech parts come into our infrastructure, there's always back doors to them. It's been the handicap of our country for a very long time, and we've seen it exploited. Some people will write off the derailments of trains, and some people will write off the planes crashing and all this stuff as just DEI. I would ask people to consider that there's actually an attack on our infrastructure. So if we were just to say, you know what, we're done with Israel today and satisfy the mob, and I will call them a mob, what would happen? Well, I think everybody fundamentally agrees Israel has two options. If Israel cannot defend itself without the United States. I think even the mob agrees with that one. Like that is an accurate statement. So if Israel could not survive an attack without us, then what two options does it leave them? It leaves them the nuclear option, right? Go full Samson and just everybody gets nuked, right? Because the elite are that evil. Or the second option is to submit and surrender in hopes that they can infiltrate once again in another 100 or 200 years. Now, what would happen in the second scenario, whether they give up or whether they're defeated, every surrounding nation there, whichever nation took over Israel, would now have control over the US infrastructure because we haven't taken back our sovereignty from it. And so the reason you see a lot of foreign actors on social media pushing for this immediate cut from Israel is because they understand that. They actually don't care about America's sovereignty. They actually don't care about exposing the cabal. A lot of them want a different faction, a different demographic to have control over America. So what do we do then? This kind of plays into, and I think the evidence is there through President Trump. If you're somebody who subscribes to the boards, there's an abundance of evidence there to support this. Is on the boards, one of the things that it says is infiltration, not invasion. And a lot of people, and there's dual meanings with these things. A lot of people, I think, have just isolated that to what's happened in our country. I agree with that, but I also don't think that that's the only intention of that post. I think what it's also telling us is how do we get our sovereignty back from Israel while we do what they did to us? Israel didn't come over here and, just pull out guns. No, it was a slow, methodical infiltration into our government, done through financing, through money laundering, through Epstein and other operations like Epstein to blackmail and control our politicians in order to leverage them to make the choices that benefit Israel or benefit, other scenarios that are out there. So what is Trump doing? Why do they keep calling Trump a Zionist? Because if Trump is going to do to Israel what they did to us, it would be an undercover operation. And I've been saying this for quite some time because that's what my job has been the last 20 years is pattern recognition, is what you are seeing is the deliberate infiltration into the Israeli government. What you're seeing is what we've been doing in the entire world. What Operation Gladio has been about is regime changes, but we've been doing these regime changes to benefit the deep state, to benefit the international crime syndicate, to benefit the bankers, to benefit these satanic occultists, to benefit that 1% of the 1%. What you're seeing now is the first time we're doing a regime change to actually counter what they've been doing to us. And what I think you're going to see, it can be immediate in the next few months. I think that it's going to play out closer to midterms, maybe just after midterms, but you're going to see a restructuring in the government of Israel. And why this way? Because you want to minimize casualties. You want to minimize, you know, the the deep state wants World War III. And so Trump has to do this in a way that we don't get there as close as it's going to seem. So if you look at the way Trump is polling in Israel, he's polling higher than Benjamin Netanyahu. That is a very important variable if you were going to do a coup to Israel. And why is a coup a better action than a military action? And that just comes down to, even though we're on these social media platforms, even though the majority of you are educated and listening to podcasts and reading Substacks, the large portion of the public has not. They're still relying on the Mockingbird media. You still have a very large portion of Christian Zionists. Not because they're bad people, not because they support genocide and because they support pedophilia. No, it's because from the second they were kids to now, this is the religious propaganda that's been put in their mind that we absolutely have to back Israel no matter what, because that's what the scripture tells us. And we've trust these institutions, so nobody's ever challenged it or thought outside the box, and that mindset is now being weaponized against us. So Trump understands this. So by doing a regime change and a coup, Trump is going to put in place a government that's there, that's going to allow us, and this can happen overtly, it can happen covertly, but we're going to be able to either completely separate ourselves from the software that's being used, or to take complete control of these back doors or identify them and remove them, so we actually have complete sovereignty of our infrastructure. Now, once that happens, then we are in the position to where we can now say we're going to cut ties from the Israeli government. Now, when that happens, Israel is going, and when I say Israel, like I said, I'm referring to the government. Israel is going to be forced into those two predicaments that I told you. Now, Trump understands this, and Trump wants to make sure we don't go to World War III. So, what has Israel always needed for World War III? Now we rewind the clock back and we go back to Iran. You have to have a little boogeyman and a big boogeyman. So obviously, we know Hamas has been the little boogeyman for Israel. Iran has been the big boogeyman for Israel. So what happened way back when we did the regime change in Iran? Who was behind that? That was the CIA, MI6, and Mossad. They were all three parties were involved. Go research Operation Ajax, and you'll be surprised to find out that the nephew of President Roosevelt was actually one that ran that operation. Now, optically, that was about, Iran's government at the time was trying to do a good thing for the Iranian people. They were like, hey, we want to nationalize our oil because that's what you should do. They wanted to take it away from the British industry that had control over it. And what did the Crown say? The Crown said, well, we can't allow you to go and make your resource to your country and nationalize it, because then other people will see how beneficial that is, and then you'll have nations all across the world trying to get their sovereignty. So the deep state had to immediately pump the brakes on this situation. And so we did a regime change there. Now, because we did this regime change, now it's hard to sell Iran as the boogeyman, because everybody kind of knows what happened, even though they're not talking about it, and you have control. Well, Israel needs that big boogeyman. So what happens now? We fast forward to the embassy hostage crisis. And why was this important? At the time that this goes down, Iranians' intelligence was known as Savak. Immediately following this, it gets rebranded into MOIS, the MOIS, and I can't think of what it stands for right now. Somebody can drop it in the chat. But when you go and you look at the personnel that was involved in Iran's Savak intelligence to the rebranding of MOIS intelligence, there was very little personnel change that took place. So if we understand how Operation Gladio works, we don't just, do regime changes at the governmental level. We do it in these intelligence covert ones as well, and we just rebrand it to sell it. And that narrative, that hostage crisis, then led to tensions between Israel and Iran and the U.S. and Iran. Why? Because ultimately, that's what you needed. And so now everybody's kind of seen the news of, what's been going back and forth with Iran and Israel and Hamas and Israel. So now if we fast forward to, the last 2 years or so, what's been going on, Benjamin Netanyahu knew under Biden's administration that if he was going to pull off a mass murder or a genocide or whatever you want to title the atrocity that we saw happen or that's been happening, he was going to have an event take place. And it was something that was not going to be able to happen under Trump. Hence the reason we didn't see it happen in his first administration. So we get October 7th. Now, and that would be a whole show in of itself. But just to summarize it, you had a country with the best, arguably the best surveillance and best intelligence network, all of a sudden get caught with its pants down. I don't believe that for 1 second. I think most people don't believe that for 1 second. What you saw there was a collaboration between the very darkest side of the Israeli government and Hamas. Hamas has remained in power over Palestine or Gaza because the US and Israel have kept them there. Anybody can go and read the Israeli Times and other unbiased articles where they talk about how Benjamin Yahu, I'll just say Bibi. It's so hard to say his last name. Yeah,
Netanyahu.
you know, yes. I always just want to say Netanyahu, but with Bibi's efforts, there's videos and statements you can go and you'll find where he says that we have to make sure that Palestine is not stabilized, that there's not unification. Because if Palestine is unified, then all of a sudden the world is going to want us to have legitimate conversations about two-state solutions. But he talks about how if there's not unity there and there's turmoil there and civil unrest there, then it provides him the out to not have that conversation. And hence why these articles talk about how this is backfiring on him. It's not backfiring on him. This is exactly what his intentions were. So you have October 7th. That gives Bibi the excuse to now facilitate the ultimate, mass murder genocide that he's doing over the Palestinian people there, right? Because he wants to expand the borders. At the same time, what is the goal of the Israeli government? It's the expansion, right? They want to increase their borders. Well, there's no way they can increase their borders without a major war, arguably World War III. Without that, you're not going to have it. So what we're seeing unfold now is what they were trying to do all the way back at the USS Liberty. The USS Liberty was not supposed to have any survivors. The USS Liberty was completely supposed to be destroyed, and it was supposed to be blamed on Egypt, and it was going to lead to a great war. For those that haven't seen, I did 2 shows with Colonel Towner on the USS Liberty, and she provides information, and especially, she used to work for the Pentagon as well, during her time in the Air Force, with people that she talked to and information she had. And for those that don't know, during the USS Liberty, we had bombers with nukes on the tarmacs ready to fly because they were waiting for the final, the ship sinking like you see in the cartoons. And then there was going to be the all-out World War III back then, which was going to ultimately lead to what the globalists wanted, World War III and a new world order. But it didn't happen that way. And there's a lot behind that where you guys can go watch it to understand. So now we're seeing that same playbook unfold now. So something I learned in the last few days that corroborates my theory here was I was doing a show with Colonel Towner on Yemen, and we agree on a lot. But me and her, for the first time in all of Operation Gladio, kind of did have a little bit of a different perspective on whether the Houthis are good versus bad. But the important part, I think the most important thing that I learned from that show and that she provided was that the UAE, I've always considered Israel just being locked down to its borders. But in this show, we learned that Djibouti, Africa, and so this is at the lower south end of the Red Sea. There's a series of islands there that Israel has installed a military complex. And then if you go off the Horn of Africa, so if you cut Yemen in half, went to about the middle, the southern tip of Yemen, and went straight down, there's another island there. I think it's called like Socotra or something like that. But Israel has military installation there. It did this in partnership with the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. Well, one of the biggest trading partners to the UAE is Iran. So think about this for a second. Israel and Iran are forever enemies, but one of Iran's biggest trading partners is doing a collaboration with Israel to put 2 bases at the southern part of the Red Sea and a little bit east of that into the gosh, I can't think of what they call that Gulf right there. But anyways, what does this tell us? What does that translate into? What that tells us is that behind the curtain, that Israel, Iran, the UAE, that these countries collaborate, that they portray these as enemies, but the deep state, the puppet masters, they're the ones that are creating this scenario and allowing this to happen. So why is Trump doing these strategic attacks on the Houthis? And for those that say, the Houthis, like the Hamas, they're just rebellious groups, I completely disagree with that. All of you have the ability right now to go to social or to the devil's internet and research the Houthis flag. And the second line in the Houthis flag is death to America. You'll see others that will say, well, no, it means, the American government. Oh, no, it means the government intelligence agencies. Well, it doesn't say death to America's government. It doesn't say death to America's intelligence agencies. It says death to America. So you're not going to change it no matter what you tell me. Now, that doesn't mean that at that fighters within these terrorist groups are not there because they are legitimate resistance people. I do believe that there are actual authentic organic resistance fighters in these groups, people that have seen their families annihilated under the worst conditions and are like, screw this, we're going to take on the world. Those people really do exist in these units. The issue is these units are controlled by the deep state. So this is where the issue comes into play. So what Trump is doing is, a few weeks ago, you saw that Trump was having talks with Hamas. This comes after Trump surprised Bibi saying, we're going to be in charge of the rebuilding of Gaza. And then you saw Trump come out and say, Palestinians will not be displaced if they don't want to be. And then following that, we hear that Hamas is in talks with Trump. And what you just heard this last week is that Palestinians are starting to rise and be vocal against Hamas. Now, Hamas has never allowed that. It would kill people if they tried to do that. So what this tells me is that in those conversations that Trump had with Hamas, he set them straight. You are not going to fight back against these people, and you're going to allow these people to take back control of an authentic resistance. I think you will see a new resistance form in Palestine. That's one that's not controlled by the deep state and not controlled by Israel. So what does that do? That removes the little boogeyman off the chessboard for Israel. So now what does Israel have left? Because Bibi knows exactly what Trump's doing. That's why these men hate each other. So now Bibi's option is now he has to activate the big boogeyman. So when Trump is preemptively striking the Houthis, what you're seeing here is Trump is strategically hitting them where their financial operations are, where their tactical headquarters are, where their leadership groups are, and in collaboration with the CIA and Mossad that's working with the Houthis. He's strategically attacking these people because it's not going to allow Iran to activate them. And when I say Iran, I'm talking about the Iranian government, in order to kick off World War III. So while all this is happening, we're also seeing that USAID got exposed. NED, the National Endowment, got exposed. Why is that important to this conversation? Because this money laundering scheme is how all this is funded. And we're seeing Doge proactively attack all this. So at the same time that the pawn pieces are being removed from the deep state through Israel, you're also seeing the funding being removed. So this forces the same strategy that I think we saw with Operation Warp Speed. And that's a different conversation, but just to put in perspective what I'm saying is the bioweapon vaccinations were not supposed to be deployed at the front end. They were going to be deployed at the back end because remember, it was supposed to be 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Hillary Clinton, and we were going to see economic downfall. We were going to see logistics crisis to represent famines. This goes into a conversation I had with Michael Yan on how he talks about the three things that no country's ever survived was economic collapse, famine, and geez, the third one evades me right now. But we saw all three of those being positioned to happen under what was going to be Hillary's administration. So what Trump did was when he did Operation Warp Speed, he put those vaccines at the front end, knowing that they weren't fully operational yet. Didn't mean people weren't going to die. It didn't mean people weren't going to be hurt. These are the choices that military commanders have to make during wars. And if you remember during Trump's administration, when he referenced China, and I'm bringing this back, I just want you guys to understand something. When he was talking about China, he said that this was a war on the United States. During that same time, you saw the Speaker of the House come out and say, I'm a wartime speaker, even though publicly no one had declared any war. Why? Because we were in a declared war. And so when Trump did that, And there was, and like I said, I won't go too far into it. We could talk about it another time if you want, Jenny. But the same way these vaccines were deployed at these mobile depots out in the sun, and what did we learn? That these vaccinations had to be maintained in cold temperatures, and they weren't. And so I think that the way these things were deployed also rendered a lot of these less effective or not effective. So yes, people were hurt. Yes, this bioweapon was horrific, but also understand that it is my opinion that a military decision was made that minimized the casualty loss that we had in this country, as horrific as that was. And don't bring to me one death is too many, because I agree with you that one death is too many. So that brings us back to what I see here. Trump is trying to make them act preemptively, so this way they don't have the massive effect that they want. Now, big boogeyman is, or little boogeyman's been removed. Big boogeyman is in the process of being removed. What did you see Trump say yesterday? You know, during the conversation, I think it was either last night or this morning. My days are blending, but he said, I sent a letter to Iran last week. Now, as far as I went to research to see if there was, any, formal public meetings that Trump had sent out a letter last week. I couldn't find one. I'm not saying there wasn't one. I just haven't been able to find it. So, as far as I'm aware of, this announcement was the first indication that we had that Trump sent a letter. Regardless, what was in that letter? Trump says that he gave them a choice. And so I think what Trump was telling them is, we know who's controlling you. We know the escalation you want to go with, and understand that if you try to do this, we already know where you're at, and we're not going to nuke all of Iran. We are going to strategically attack you just like we just did to the Houthis. The same way we attacked targets that you thought we didn't know about. This whole thing with the letter, I'm sorry, with the signal chat that came out, absolutely, I don't believe that that was accidental. I'm not going to subscribe to that. There was just enough information that was in there. And last night, I'll tell you guys, I'm going to do a quick little plug, Jenny. Last night, I did a show with CanCon called SitRep. It's on Badlands Media over at Rumble. We had a chance to interview Colonel Sean that was on there, who is just brilliant when it comes to technology. And just so you guys understand his authority to speak on the matter, we've all seen the movies where we have the intercontinental ballistic missiles, the guys that turn the key during a nuclear war. He was one of those guys. He's also been so he completely understands the encryption stuff that comes with the signal and all this other stuff. So we had this conversation with this gentleman. Well, in this conversation, one of the things that I asked if this was a possibility, and he acknowledged, yes, it's a possibility, is we know that these these communications, whether it's WhatsApp and Signal, that they're being monitored. There's no way that the Trump administration were having conversations on Signal with the understanding that these were completely private. They absolutely knew that they were being monitored. Now, here's the thing here's my educated speculation here. The information that went out didn't it was not target specific. So whoever was monitoring that chat was then going to relay to the Houthis, to the deep state, this is the attack that America is going to do. Now, with them not knowing what target specifics they were, what was going to force was one of two things: either digital chatter or kinetic movement. Both were going to reveal locations that we were doing, because the same way they were monitoring us, we were monitoring them. So it was going to give us two things. It was going to give us confirmation on real target locations, and it was also going to allow us to figure out who was sending the information to the Houthis. So this way, it's working backwards on where these deep state operatives were, which is going to allow us to track them and pinpoint them. Hence that letter that somewhere in that letter that Trump sent to Iran, that we will find you specifically and take you out. And then Trump does this attack to show that he actually has the capabilities to do whatever threats he articulated in that letter. So I say all that to say this: it's not an end all at Israel. The deep state wants World War III. Trump understands that they're going to bring us to the brink of World War III. We've been told certain countries are our adversaries. We've been told certain countries are our allies. And we're going to find out that some of those, I'm not saying all of them, but some of those are inaccurate the way they've been described to us. Why are we moving fleets to certain positions? Why are we putting some of our navy close to the area of Japan? Some would say, well, because China is one of our adversaries and we have to be positioned there. And China has a deep state just like us. And I would say that that's not entirely false, but two things could be true at the same time. And if we've always been told that China is our adversary, there could be a deep state battle within China where there is an ally that also exists there, just like with North Korea, just like with Putin and Russia. And we could be positioning fleets there because we're actually positioning ourselves to parallel our actual allies. On top of that, you would still got to deal with the issue of Taiwan because of the semiconductors there, certain nuclear secrets that are there, and we have to make sure that that's protected because, like I said, China is still operating with the deep state as well that we have to make sure we're prepared for. So what you guys are seeing right now is the first layer of the chessboard pieces being positioned. But above that, the second layer of this chessboard is Trump making moves that these operatives are going to try to sound one way to pull it out of context to undermine the presidency in America. But the deep state recognizes exactly what's happening. That's what's happening here. You have the conversation of Trump and King Charles about the United States rejoining the Commonwealth, and everybody panicked, right? And I can understand why when people just want to look at it at the surface level. But I will remind everybody, have we ever been part of any world organization that America wasn't the shot caller in it? Even when it comes to NATO and the WF, and even when they've tried to exploit us, we saw that when a man is in control like Trump, he went in there and he called them all out and he controlled it. We also just heard the last couple of days that King Charles ain't doing so well. So whether America goes into the Commonwealth or whether this was just a pressure tactic, I would say monitor it, but don't freak out too much. Because the other thing, and I'm going to bring us back to the board here because I thought this was such a cryptic but cool message, was Trump said, go into the Commonwealth, and I forget exactly how he worded it, but he said, considering that in 2026, it would be our 250th anniversary from leaving them. Now, why is that important? Well, let's go into the numbers game real quick, and I'll bring us back. 250, if you know how these numbers and numerology and some of these different things work, right? You have 2 plus 5 plus 0 equals 7 for the 250 years. And then the year 2026, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 6, which would give you 2 and 2 is 4 and 6 is 10. Then when you add the two together, 10 and 7 would get you 17, which brings you to the thing nobody can talk about, which is Q, right? The 17th letter of the alphabet. I thought that was a pretty cool shout out to the Anons out there. Maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing. So I, I want to make sure Jenny and Santino, if you guys am I keeping this on track? Because if I'm confusing people, I can clear some things up because I know I'm trying to blanket cover everything.
No, you're on it. I'm just
Okay.
in the background, just like blown away. You are so spot on. You're doing a great job. Good job, Alpha.
Okay. So let's package it with a ribbon here. Trump is going to force the deep state, in my opinion, sometime in the next 4 to 12 weeks to push their military hand. Because they can't the military response can't happen around midterms because even the deep state knows that military events always benefit the sitting president. So they don't want that. They can't wait till after midterms because that would be too far out. So that means that this military escalation would probably happen as soon as, like I said, sometime in the next 12 weeks, or if not, sometime definitely in 2025. So expect that. But if you think that anything I said sounds logical and plausible, then understand I'm saying that with a limited scope and a limited information to what Trump has. So imagine the confidence and the ability for them to make the moves they need to be ahead of them. Because everything that we're seeing, Trump is steps ahead of them, which means they are absolutely in control. And so if you guys got questions on it, if there was something that I said that didn't make sense that you want me to go back and cover, I'll let you guys ask away now, Jenny or Santino, however you want to address it.
Santino, do you have any questions or thoughts?
No, I'm all good. I just want everybody to go down to the purple pill. Please, the bomb you right your phone. I'd like you to just like the space, like and share the space, and quote and share the space. Keep going. You're on point, Alpha.
Do you want to take questions on that, Alpha, or do you just want to continue?
I would love to take questions on it now, before we get into the next topic, because I don't want people to forget. And while it's still fresh in their minds, I'd like to address it now.
Okay, so everybody, if you'd like to request a mic, and if you have a question for Alpha regarding this particular topic, please request the mic. We will unmute your mic. Otherwise, Alpha will go on to the next about the infiltration. And everybody here, we are here for you guys, so please don't be shy. I know many of you in here aren't, but request a mic because this has been quite the topic here in many areas, especially here in these spaces. So if you have any confusion or questions regarding it, please feel free. Request that mic. We will unmute your mic. And you know what, Alpha, if nobody requests, then you can just continue. So, oh, Charlie,
It's because we're scared of them.
did you have one, Charlie?
I've been trying to DM folks to come up. I was going to mention earlier, Alpha, it was Gulf of Aden, Aden, but I was going to ask if you could expand a little bit more about the contingency as far as the management of Gaza and in the event, as far as the numbers of troops. I think that's, if anything, the hindering effect that some people are opposed to with the America First movement is how many of our troops will be destined to work in the area. Have you received any information and updates about that? We'd love to hear it. Thank you.
I have not received any information on that, so I'll tell you what my speculation is on that, because I've been really trying to game theory this out, because Trump's team, and when I'm talking about his team, I'm not talking like the campaign and the presidency. I'm talking about like the covert operation that he's a part of. Trump's team understands that if he puts American troops, boots, and I'm not talking about covert teams, special ops, I'm talking about like a large deployment, that is going to hurt him major. That is going to impact him very bad. It's also going to have an impact on a lot of the people that are trying to help articulate what's going on. So if we actually see a deployment of troops, like actual ground troops into like Gaza or into Yemen, what that tells me is that the situation is probably far worse than what we've been gauging, and we need to go back and reevaluate it from the very beginning. So I'm giving out worst case scenario here first. What I think we'll probably see is a very large presence. I think we will see a lot of stuff that's done through air superiority, and I think we will see covert operations that may be sold as maybe an American like SEAL team, or maybe even as another ally government doing something, because that is something Trump can still articulate, and people won't be afraid of. And what I mean by this is they want us to say Trump's going to start World War III. Trump knows this, and that's why Trump doesn't want to get him there. And I'll get into one of the things that are brought up. I want to say on Captain Kyle's space, on two scenarios on how they can remove Trump. But if we look at Trump's first administration, that allows us to use historic factual data to articulate arguments against these deep state operatives that are trying to undermine him now. What we saw during Trump's first administration was he started no new wars, but he did many strategic attacks. And all of those attacks, none of them led to an endless war, World War III. So it showed us that Trump knows how to actually do effective strategic hits to accomplish his goals. So when we look at these attacks on the Houthis, it's fair. It's a fair assessment to gauge it with the historic data that we have. So I want to make sure everybody understands that, because it's one of the things that if you guys try to go into these other spaces, which I challenge you to do, that is one of the arguments that they're going to put in front of you. Well, your president's trying to start World War III. And what I just gave you is a very logical and reasonable explanation to counter that argument back against them. Um,
Thank you. And I wanted to add that we know each other because we're veterans. My husband's still serving. He's an Air Force officer. And I will tell you, this is unclassified, but we have gone from a strategic to an operational reserve in the event. And then, we just, sent out another aircraft carrier, which it's not just a carrier that goes out, right? You have an entire fleet that goes out. And this is obviously for defense strategy tactics as well as preparation. But thank you, Alpha. And thank you, Jenny, for hosting this for us, and Santino for co hosting as always.
Of course. Thank you for being here. And real quickly, Alpha, can you maybe also too address the meaning when we hear Israel for last, save Israel for last? Can you maybe expound a little bit on that?
Absolutely. I do want to make one more comment on something Charlie said. Um, and you can add more to this, Charlie, if you have the information. One of the things that'll make the hairs on the back of my neck rise to be like, shit, we are really close to a legitimate, like putting troops on the ground, is when we start to see a massive activation of our combat reserve units. So for those that don't know, when we actually go to war, we typically start off with our reserve units, especially in the Marine Corps. Now, for a lot of people, would be like, well, what do you mean? Why wouldn't you do an active duty unit? Aren't they the ones that are better trained? Too, our reserve units, especially within the Marine Corps, are top tier, and the vast majority of these guys are first responders, or they're older guys with a lot of experience behind them, and a lot of them have been active before going to like the Marine Corps reserves. So if we start to see the activation of our combat units within the Marine Corps, then I'll start being like, okay, I need to start, game theorying this part out, because that's probably a good indication that we're actually going to put troops on the ground, which is not something I want, but we would have to start strategically analyzing that. Would you say I'm pretty accurate with that statement, Charlie?
Yes, Alpha, and we have activated. I've asked my husband just to make sure we have activated our Air Force Reserve. We have gone from a strategic to an operational effort. Just so you know, this is a live update. Just to give you an example, they're working weekends now, and I haven't seen my husband work weekends since the Israel war took off, actually.
So I'm still calm with it being our air support superiority part of it. If we start seeing, fourth LAR and fourth recon and some of these guys getting activated, then I'm going to start getting pretty nervous. Um, the other thing I want to say, and then I'll address your question too, Jenny. If there's anybody in the audience and you have an opposing view or counter view to what I'm saying, feel free to challenge me. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna bark at you and fight. And ultimately, we can agree to disagree, or maybe you can impact my perspective, or I can impact yours. I know the way Jenny and Santino operate this. This isn't going to be the way you see combat some of the other spaces I'm in, because those are deliberate, like psyop trenches, and there's a way that I handle those versus the way I handle these. So if you want to challenge something I said, please don't hesitate. There's probably other people that may have that same perspective. As far as what you asked, Jenny, save Israel for last.
Yeah, that was a question. I want to give her the acknowledgement. Joan, in the audience here, she wanted to know about the Israel being last.
100%. So this kind of goes back to what I was, touching on earlier. We have a large portion of America that are Christian Zionists. That has a huge court of public opinion impact. And one of the things in information warfare, psychological warfare, as a matter of fact, it was the first interview that I did with General Flynn. I think it was the last question I may have even asked him. But I said, hey, what is this percentage of the court of public opinion that you think we need, and how close are we to it to facilitate some of the things that we have on there? And essentially what he was saying is, if I remember correctly, we had just met that percentage, or we were almost there, or something like that. But the reason I was asking, and I've never changed my position on this, even though it's going to include a very controversial statement here that people will probably try to clip and take it out of context. The court of public opinion is so powerful in information warfare that whoever controls the court of public opinion could make moves that even defy our Constitution, and there would be no pushback against it. That's how powerful the court of public opinion is. Now, with that said, I 100% stand behind the Constitution. I wouldn't ever want to see it defied. I'm just trying to articulate how powerful the court of public opinion is. So in order, well, so when we see the board suggests or state, saving Israel for last, that means by the time we get to that threshold, we have to dominate the court of public opinion, because you have to thread the needle here, because you have one shot and one shot only. And if you miss, humanity is going to suffer the consequence. And so what we're seeing with the JFK files and what we saw in phase one of the Epstein files is now the conversation of Israel's involvement in collaboration with our CIA and other entities around the world is reaching the surface level, the quote unquote normies. And I don't say that out of disrespect. It's just most people understand that demographic when you use normies. So when normies are seeing these conversations brought to mainstream media, aka the Mockingbird media, they're going to start to be like, hey, wait, what? Now, what is going to end up happening is the JFK, everybody thinks that Pam Bondi's deployment of the Epstein files was a debacle. Let me tell you, it was strategic. It was done to perfection. I've addressed that with the ability for her to collaborate with Cash in order to expose what was going on at the SDNY, remove the one of the heads at the New York. There's a whole conversation there. You guys have heard me said. I won't go into it unless you guys want me to, but it allowed the setup and the conversation to build. Now you have the JFK files that came, which is something because not everybody knows about the Epstein ones, but everybody knew about the JFK ones. And so when the JFK files now surfaced, and you saw the Israeli intelligence, you saw our CIA saying, "Hey, that's the only thing we want to center or censor is the verbiage of Israel and Israeli intelligence." That now put Israel in the conversation with confirmation. That literally vindicated all the quote unquote conspiracy theorists for the last couple of decades with that particular subject matter. So now what you're going to see is you're going to see this phase two or three, you might see two that deploy at the same time, of the Epstein files come out. And so now that you have confirmation from a case that everybody in the United States knows about with JFK's assassination, now these Epstein files are going to have a lot more weight. So as we get pushed to the brink of this World War III, you're also going to see the systematic exposure of the Israeli government, the deep state's proxy. You're going to see that exposure happen in unison. And the reason you're going to see this is because as they ramp it up to bring us closer and closer, because they need, control out of chaos, they need that. You're also going to start seeing the public, the normie public, be like, wait, hold on. They were involved with the JFK assassination, if not directly behind it. Hold on. The Mossad is the reason that our government officials, it's one of the many reasons, because it's not just Mossad, but it's one of the means of how they've been able to leverage our government for all the stuff that we see Doge exposing. And then trust me, you're going to start seeing the conversations be brought up back to 9/11. And when all this exposure happens with Israel, you're going to see the American people, the court of public opinion of the American people, say, there's no fucking way we want World War III in defense of the Israeli government when all this has been the result of them to begin with. And how that plays out, how Trump handled it, I don't really have a clear pinpoint on that just yet. But I do know that that's what's going to surface, and that's what's going to allow Trump to be like, no, we're going to have to actually come to some type of verbal, non-combative understanding of how we're going to avoid World War III, or you'll see strategic attacks that are going to completely decimate the deep state once and for all. I don't know how that's going to look just yet. We need to get closer for me to see more moves made, but that's kind of like the area of operation of how I see that's going to unfold.
Alpha, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. Let's just circle back. You just tapped into it a few minutes ago. When it comes to all these topics that we're discussing, we go in spaces, there is a bit of a war happening, and, people are choosing sides, and they have every right to choose sides. But how do you deal with that when you're in a space and you have a different point of view? And also, you're right about 9/11. Everybody's talking about 9/11. They're circling back to that as well. And they're throwing that into the mix. But I want to know, because we had a situation, you know what I'm talking about, where, you did it with class, you stood there and you let them continue and talk. So I wanted you to give people advice in here when they're going to spaces. How would they deal with that situation where there is a bit of a war happening and names are being called and everybody's attacking each other? How would you deal with it? Or any advice you'd give anybody in here? Thank you.
No, 100%. And it's a perfect segue into this next conversation, anyways. And then if anybody has conversations back to what we're just talking about, feel free to still ask and I'll go back to it. The easiest answer here, and then I'll get into like specific tactics, but the easiest answer is don't let them box you in. They want to position you, they want to make it a binary argument. They want to say, well, if you're this, then that means you're for genocide. If you're this, then that means you're anti-Semitic. If you're American, just come out and if I mean if you agree with this, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I would think the vast majority of Americans have this position. Just tell them I'm pro-America. That's my position. Well, then that means you support genocide. Tell them, no, I don't. I think genocide's an atrocity, and I think the people behind it
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
to be held accountable for it. And then if you stick to your core principles and don't allow them to manipulate your position, you will win 100% of the time. 100% of the time. It's why they get so frustrated with me, because they'll go on one of my threads and be like, see, he's a Zionist. And then people in the thread are like, but he's exposing the Israeli government. Oh, but he's talking about the Khazars. So then they're like, well, well, they can't argue that because they can't box me in. Their whole strategy, and this goes back all of what they're doing, what you guys are seeing happen in real time to you and other people on this platform and other platforms, is what Yuri Bezmenov, he was a defected KGB agent, told us about decades ago, in 1984, actually, if I got the year correct. He talked about ideological subversion, and that's what you're seeing unfold on this platform. And for any of those people that are like, man, this just sounds like a bunch of conspiracy theorists talking. A few days ago, Army Central Command on social media posted a video, pretty cool video, and the whole theme of the video is irregular warfare. Well, what you're seeing happen right now, this is irregular warfare, you guys, that's unfolding on these social media apps. And I'm saying this because I need people to understand who's actually attacking them. And who's actually attacking them are, and not all, but the vast majority are trained professionals, trained operatives that are for foreign governments, they're for NGOs, they're for some of our adversaries, some of them are the private sector. There's a bunch of different people that are on this app for a bunch of different motives. But what positioned everybody here was when the large population turned away from mainstream media. That was a big hurdle for Mockingbird Media, because how do they control the narrative, right? Because and some would say, but Alpha, you just said the vast majority of normies are still watching mainstream. Yes, but here's the difference in people. The vast majority of people that are still watching mainstream media are people that I classify as watchers and listeners, not the actionable people. The people that moved away from mainstream media are the people that I consider the actionable population. They moved away because they were taking proactive steps to move away from propaganda that was being pushed on them. They made active steps to search out for the truth. These are the people that you want to make sure are educated on what's going on. And I'm talking about you guys. Like that's who I'm trying to explain now. You guys are the people that, when given information, will start calling senators. You guys are the ones that will be part of grass movements. You guys are the ones that will go and all of a sudden become part of these election teams. You guys have a bigger impact. So even though you're the minority, you still have the majority impact. So Mockingbird Media, the deep state, recognizes. So they didn't throw their hands up and say, okay, well, we lost. No, they had to deploy a new type of asset into this new irregular warfare of social media, podcasts, radio, etc. Now, things that support this, and I have evidence to prove it on something that I'm working on, but and I use Clubhouse because it's one that a lot of people know, but I also want people to understand it wasn't just Clubhouse. But you saw the active recruitment of personalities from Clubhouse for monetary incentives and other type of incentives to push specific propaganda, specific narratives, especially surrounding COVID. Like this goes back several years. These people were then recruited with large payments to come to Twitter, because it wasn't X yet, but to come to Twitter to specifically push narratives. Now, all this was happening right before Elon was going to take over as X. And the reason they had to rush this is because they knew this is where the game changed, the strategy, all right, chess. They knew that the way they were censoring our voices was through deplatforming us, through the algorithms. Well, they knew they were no longer going to have the ability to deplatform our voices. So they had to flood it with other voices to make it an active combat of information. So they knew that they were going to have to move from the strategy of censorship to the strategy of now flood it with so much information, everybody's confused. And we're going to come in with people that already have followings. So this way, what do people do? We tend to move to the space of the largest people to see what's going on. So you were going to have these spaces that came in with these people that were collaborating together to have the conversations around COVID, have the conversations around elections, or have the conversations, plug in whatever you have, and there it was. It was in every sphere. So now that you know who was behind this, I'll finish answering Santino's question. Well, how do you deal with it? One, they're going to try to trigger you emotionally, because if they can trigger you to react emotionally, you're not going to think straight. And it doesn't matter how much facts and information you've armed yourself with, you're not going to be able to articulate it because they got under your skin. So even though they can't see you, smile, because when you're smiling, you keep composure. So smile while you're in this space and somebody is trying to obliterate you. And then when you respond, throw a subtle little jab. Well, now that you got that out of your system, you didn't address this fact, and this fact. Because then the audience is going to be listening and be like, man, that was heated, and this person's right. They didn't address that fact. So, and they'll keep dodging around it. And so then the audience realizes, well, nobody wants to challenge that fact. So it's probably true, and I should probably look into it. And that's how you put that information that's out there. The other thing, they're going to try to use your virtues against you. And this has been one of the biggest handicaps, especially for conservatives, where we have always just been taught, whether through respect or spiritually, just turn the cheek, turn the cheek, turn the cheek. Meanwhile, while we're doing that, people don't hear the truth. You guys have to have the courage to tell people straight out. You can't leave it open to interpretation. You have to just come out and tell people, no, you're wrong, you're lying, and here's the correct information. Don't say, well, unless it is an opinion, but if they're trying to project something as fact, come out and say, well, that's not fact, that's your opinion. You have to use words that the audience recognizes, because words are extremely important. Words are the bullets of an information war. And so you have to make sure that you're very precise with the words that you use. And then at the end of the day, the way you win is be educated. Research these topics. If while you're down there as a listener and you're hearing things, have a notepad. Like every single one of you should have a notepad, or use your phone notepad. And when you hear something, you're like, I know that's bullshit, but I don't have the information. So the second you have the ability to research, you go and you immediately research that, and you make sure that you have a complete understanding of that. And then you go back to that battlefield, because that person's going to push the propaganda again, and this time you hit them with the information. And that's how you'll win. The other thing that I'll say is, don't let them, they try to use what our government has done through propaganda and lies to build guilt on you. And I'll speak specifically to the veterans. Like they'll tell me all the time, well, you were a puppet, and you joined because you wanted to support the puppet regime. Well, I know that's bullshit. I supported because I had the balls and the courage to be like, an enemy attacked my country, and I'm going to go attack them back. And eventually we learned the truth of how it unfolded. But don't let them manipulate what you know is factual, and stand up for that. Our American veterans are the elite of our country. These are people that are willing to sacrifice and die for all of us so that we can maintain this freedom. And we should always defend our veterans. And one of the things that they want to do, this is ideological subversion, is they want you, and they want the veterans to see it. They want to see you, the American people, either be quiet or turn on your veterans to destroy the morale of our veterans. So this way our veterans aren't as combat effective as we need them to be. So I hope that answers your question, Santino.
No, thank you, Alpha. You know, it's you're absolutely correct. Your emotions get entailed when you're listening, and you have no problem because it's either hidden personally, so you want to just bounce back and attack back. But keeping calm and composure is really important. Just quickly, I want to say something. You know, when you're insulting a co-host or a host, any of the co-hosts, if they block you, you're only hurting yourself in the end. Because when that host or those co-hosts go into another space and they're hosting or co-hosting, you won't be able to enter that space. So the thing is to bite your tongue and not hit below the belt because this is about information, not about hitting people personally. So I just want to throw that out there, and I'm going to punt it back to Jenny. Thank you, Al, for answering that question.
Thank you, Santino. Thank you, Alpha. And everybody here, if you have a question for Alpha, great job, by the way, Alpha. You're just a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for just putting this out there for everybody, because I'm telling you what, there's a lot of confusion on it. I have a couple hands raised. So, Jersey, I know you had your hand raised for a second. Did you want to ask Alpha something? If so, request a mic. We will unmute your mic. But in the meantime, Chris, go ahead. And then after Chris, Joan, you can go. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Great to be on here with Alpha and all of you. Happy Friday to you. Positive attitudes, positive movement. We're all great energy together. True conservatives. None of this fake deep state bullshit. And I was doing some notes just as you were saying that, Alpha. So wanted to bring up a couple points here. Like you said, propaganda for guilt. That is a tactic that they use. They love to use it. This came up last night with the space with the CCP. They went into this long diatribe. They must have had index cards out about everything America's done wrong, right? And all the atrocities we've committed. And I'm like, hold up. We didn't agree with going to a war in Iraq. We didn't agree with a 10 plus year occupation in Afghanistan. This is all the deep state apparatus. That's why we have Trump to remove this. So you can't tie everything we've done as a country to the people that are Trump supporters supporting the U.S. They try to twist it. You know, I'm like, we didn't vote for Obama. We didn't vote for Biden. We didn't agree with Clinton. I mean, so don't let them tie everything into you just because you're a citizen of the U.S. That has nothing to do with us. The people, okay, the people understand what this is about. And it's no different than the Chinese people that are under control of the CCP. They don't agree with the CCP. They want to take down the CCP. So the people that aren't members of the CCP, they're not our enemies. There's patriots in every country. Alpha's brought up that point before, so understand that. It's not where you're born. It's not what family you come from. It's, do you believe in freedom? Do you believe in a government not oppressing you? Do you believe in what's right for the people? If you are, you're a patriot. And you can be from anywhere. I got Chinese nationals come on all the time with me. They're MAGA to the core. They love Trump. They want the CCP to be taken down. You know, they're Christians. I mean, just understand this is going on all over the world. This is an international movement. It's not just in the U.S. So I wanted to bring up that point. Don't ever let somebody make you feel guilty for being an American. All of us have made mistakes in life as people and as countries, and we're all going to make mistakes, and it's human error. And some of these were intentional errors that the people would never have supported. So don't ever feel guilty about that. That's point number one. Point number two, all right, binary cause and effect. I love this because what they try to do is isolate you, right? So if you support Israel in any capacity, then they say that you're for genocide and atrocities committed against children and women. And they'll say that you're all for killing innocent people. And it's just not that shallow of a argument. The fact is, this is a lot of depth. There's a lot going on here. There are mistakes made by everybody in the world, whether you're Palestinian, whether you're Israeli, whether you're a U.S. citizen, whether you're part of the CCP. You got to look at the history of it, and you got to look at the intentionality of it, and you got to understand the deeper context. So look at it from 50,000 feet above. And last thing, as we've talked about, don't get emotionally invested. Do not take these people seriously. There is no point to taking them seriously. Stick to the facts. Take the emotion out of it. When they start dropping the F-bombs and they start going at you and calling you an asshole, I mean, that happened like 10 minutes in. By the time we got a half hour in last night, one guy left. He was so pissed off. The other dropped down and wouldn't talk. And so my next thought was, okay, what's the next op? Because we have the expat op in China. So what's the next op? Right into the next op. Co-host muting me about 4 times. You won't call out Israel. You're not calling out Israel. You're saying the CCP has infiltrated this country. What about Israel? And I knew exactly what was coming on next. And within 20 minutes, we had Simon in there going against Israel. Truth teller to the mic with his long-winded speech that I've heard 1,000 times in X Spaces. One thing after another. We'd even have a guy interrupt him every now and then. He would go into a tizzy. He was losing his shit on the mic. Hey, at times, just let them talk. That's all you need to do. Let them talk and let everybody hear how irrational they are. Let them hear that they have no plan. They have an agenda and they don't have a solution. Anybody can come on a mic and tell you what the problem is. How many have a solution to move this country forward? That's the difference between Alpha and our host here, Santino, all the great people in here. These are people that are Americans, that are loyal to our country. We own the errors, we own the mistakes, but we have solutions to move this country forward, and we're willing to work collectively together to change things for good. And that's what it's about. Don't ever apologize for being a conservative. Don't ever apologize for being a patriot. And most of all, don't ever apologize for being an American. We are the greatest country in the world, and if that offends somebody, they can fuck off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for your. I love it when you speak. So thank you for coming in here today. Real quickly, Alpha. I want to check in on you, see how you're doing on time. I know you said an hour, and I just want to get in there with you and see how you're doing on time.
Yeah, I'm still good. I still got about another 20-25 minutes.
Sweet. All right. All right, everybody. So if you have a question for Santino, please raise your hand. I have unmuted a few mics, so I'm not really sure who has a question or not, but raise your hand. So go ahead, Joan. You can ask Alpha your question, and then Fed Up with Media. You can go after that. And then Sergeant, what is it? Sergeant. I'm just going to call you Sarge. You can go after Fed Up with Media. So
And we
go
also
ahead, Joan.
Jen, we also have Jairi.
Oh, yeah. And then you can go after Sergeant J. Go ahead, Joan. Go ahead, Joan.
Thank you, Jenny. Hey, Santino. Hey, Alpha. OG Badlander here. I'm going to go to what Trump signed on March 25th, the executive order preserving and protecting integrity of American elections. How the hell are we going to get 60 people on board to make this happen? Because that's for me, that's the number one issue. If we don't have free and fair elections, how are we ever going to make it? What do you think on that?
I think it's probably the most powerful executive order that he's done. And one of the reasons being, it doesn't matter. All of us have our pet peeves. Like we all have the flank that we want to fight on. But at the end of the day, if the elections aren't secured, then it's all in vain. It's literally all in vain. So how we get the 60 is a very good question. So either Trump has one of two things in mind. He's presenting this before midterms to expose the people who don't want to get behind it in order to give us a strong positioning to primary them in midterms. So win it that way, which means then once we get, America first type of people in at midterms, then he presents this again. So it's because it's the order that he's doing is more for 2028 than it is for 2026. It'll benefit 2026 if we get it in first, and I would like it there. But I think strategically he's doing it for the presidency. And I think he's doing it now this early in order to leverage it in one way or the other. Either force them to adopt it so they don't get primaried, or expose them through opposing it so they get primaried and we get more America First people coming in at midterms. So however they work, it's going to happen before we get to 2028. We'll see if he can get it before 2026. But either way, it's still going to benefit Trump and how he wants to get people in and get people out.
Thank you, John. Okay, so Fed Up with Media, go ahead.
Yeah, well, one thing I heard y'all talking about I totally agree with you when you said about don't let people make that where it's you and the government are the one thing, right? And that's one of the things they try to do to shut down so many arguments is they try to connect the people and the governments. It's like somebody gave the example: if you're talking a certain way, then you're pro the genocide of children. And on the other side, if there's some people, if you are critical at all of the Israeli government, how quick does the anti-Semite term get thrown out, right? When you're talking about the government and their actions, and and the funny thing is, and maybe this is kind of a question, maybe a strategy, how to work in on these people, because that's one that really gets me is the people that'll sit here and be critical as could be of the U.S. government, legitimately. Not even saying they don't have legitimate. We all have our criticisms of the American government, and especially did the previous 4 years, right? But then they'll turn around, and if you are critical of certain governments, you're instantly either pro-Russian, you're an anti-Semite, you're go down the list, right? That's the thing they always do. You can't be critical of the flavor of the day, but yet you have to be critical of our government, right? They and I don't know with some of these folks whether that's ideology, whether it's propaganda, probably a little of both. um, so I encourage people, definitely don't let that happen. But I guess my question is, how do you go about maybe getting these people to see the light that it's all the same? It's all just criticizing the government, not the people.
Well, the first thing, and some people have probably heard me say this before, I'm never trying to flip any of the speakers. And the reason being, because it's my opinion that somewhere between 60 to 70% of the speakers, and when I'm talking speakers, I'm talking about the ones you see routinely in spaces pushing a certain script. They're not there because they're trying to find the truth. Excuse me. They're not there because they believe this. Sorry, guys, I'm choking. They're there because they have a job and a mission to do. And so when you understand that the vast majority of these operatives are at play, you're presenting. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to talk without dying on you. But if I die, at least the space will go viral.
Aw.
This is where Alpha choked out. The deep state got him. Um, but what you're providing the information for the audience. It's the listener, and so just understand that you're doing a dance with your adversary that's in the space with you, but you're doing it for the person that's listening, because, like I said, the vast majority of people that you're dealing with are operatives, and that's why you'll hear when you present, because and one of the things that Chris said, and if you guys aren't following Chris H, you, since I've heard him speak, the dude has been phenomenal. You guys are going to see he's going to be a prominent voice on this platform, and so I would suggest you guys start following now and start learning his position. But one of the things that he said that I absolutely agree with is let them talk, because they'll interrupt themselves, and they'll expose themselves. In one of these spaces a couple nights ago, a lot of people were trying to give Santino heat because of a lot of stuff that Truth Teller was saying about me, because they got in there late. But what a lot of people didn't realize was Santino actually went to stop him, and then I came off mic and told Santino, let him go, I'm okay with it. And the reason I was okay with it is because I wanted people to see how how Truth specifically, and others with him, how he truly feels about America, American veterans, and his position. Sometimes you don't have to say anything; you just let them talk, and people will be like, and I know by the messages I got, like, man, I'd never seen him like that. And what you saw is he's used to people playing tennis with him and going back and forth. And when I didn't do it, he got more irritated, which made him start to get even louder, that's not a bad thing. It allows the audience to see. And then you just come back and you just bring it to a very simple thing. Well, how do you feel about this? Well, it's not, and when you can lock people down in these statements, like, and here's the thing, because we're talking about operatives on here. There are a lot of people over the last couple of years who have been presenting themselves as Trump supporters, presenting themselves as MAGA and America first. Why? Because you have to. When I did undercover operations, I didn't go into the gang and say, "Hey, I'm here because I'm going to trick you guys and then I'm going to arrest everybody." Like, no, they would have killed me. I had to go in there and talk like they talk, do the things that they do to a certain point. Don't get it twisted, because I had to make them believe I was one of them. Well, that's the same thing that these operatives are doing to you. They have to make you believe. They have to develop that rapport. Why? So when the handler sends them the, "Hey, you're activated, flip this," that's the impact. Because they don't have to convert 100% of the people that believe them. If they can convert anywhere from 25 to 30%, that's a huge impact when you look at how many of them are operating. That has an exponential impact on MAGA. And so they understand this. So that's why you'll hear me tell people straight out, do you think that the Houthis are a terrorist organization? Yes or no? And they'll try to dance around it, and I'll let them dance around it so the audience can see, and then I'll come right back to it. Okay, the flag says death to America. Does that concern you? And what I'm doing is I'm showing Americans that these people will find every excuse to support an organization that wants death to America, but then turn around and have no problem and no hesitation shitting on Trump, shitting on you, and shitting on veterans. And so why is that important? Because it shows people where their loyalty stands. And you'll see the other side. They keep trying to say it's a Trump cult. The vast majority of us on here I've seen criticize Trump at different positions depending on what things are important to us. I think we're 100% when we're all like Trump, like Lindsey Graham's a fucking douche. Like we don't none of us support you on that one. But that said, we also have the understanding of he's playing chess. We get what's going to go out there. And when you expose these people that try to use that against you, you can fire back, and you can come out and say, okay, you say that we support Trump 100%, and I think Trump is absolutely making a mistake by putting support behind Lindsey Graham. So now the audience hears you being critical of a choice that Trump made. So you're already defeating the argument that you're just going to agree with everything that Trump does, which is hugely important in this situation. Now that said, here's the gray area, because once again, it's wordplay. Information warfare is wordplay. They'll try to say, well, when we were scrutinizing Trump about Pam Bondi or Kash Patel, you guys came at us and called us pretenders. Here's the distinction, and this is where you guys are smart enough to see through the bullshit. There's a difference between questioning, criticizing, being concerned, and trying to undermine a presidency. And when you have people come out and say, well, I've always been a supporter of Trump, and then go research their timeline for the last 2, 3, 4 years, you're like, damn, no, they haven't. They've never posted anything. And then you see the next one. So then you bring that to the attention. You guys saw me do it in real time with a person. Well, I said this. Well, yeah, but that was about a doctor that he picked. It wasn't support of Trump. Name one policy or law that Trump has done that you've publicly supported. And what happens is now you start to expose these people, and then they get pissed. And then this one particular person responded by doxing my mom's house and doxing the names of my kids. Now, granted, um, I sent a private message making it very clear what would happen should anything happen to my mom or my kids. But it also shows people, well, who in MAGA would ever dox another MAGA person? What American conservative would ever try to dox another American conservative? It starts to reveal who people really are when you remove the facade. And that's what's important in information warfare. And so I know I went off on a little rant there, but that the question brought up a lot of things that I wanted to cover. But I got about 10 more minutes, Jen. I see a couple hands, so if we end up going a little bit over that, that's okay. I want to make sure everybody with their hands up has an opportunity to ask.
All right, cool, awesome. All right, let's see. We've got Sergeant Petrie. Go ahead. Your mic is unmuted.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Santino. See some friends in here. Chris, brother, I had to step out last night. I couldn't do it. It was just too much bleeding of the ears. But it was, you did good. And, but Alpha, brother, I got a question for you. Remember a few spaces back, we were talking about the back door, right, to US, to all of our network, our framework and everything. Is Gaza, do you think that is like Trump's way of stepping in saying, hey, look, if anyone's going to get the rights? Because from the way I look at it, there's a lot of places or a lot of other countries that are looking at Israel right now for property, right? So when you look at it, and I'm just trying to be like, not to throw off any algorithms here, but do you think that it has to do with the reason why that is actually occurring where we have, damn, I had these, hold on. Let me see if I can get this pulled back up because I just had them up. And where's my history? Here we go. When I look at things, and I did some graphications on the old research, a lot of companies come back, that could have potential backdoor access into our infrastructure or mainframes. And it looks like it's like Checkpoint Software, Amdocs. There was one other one, I can't remember what it was. But whenever I look at Microsoft is got a lot of R&D investments in Israel. Apparently, Amazon Web Services, Cloud Domain has got a lot of that in there. Okay, go play. I'm asking some questions. Thank you, buddy. Love you. Sorry, I'm a stay-at-home dad. Go on, buddy. Close the door. Close the door. And so basically my question is, do you think that he's trying to prevent anyone else from getting, and cyber reason, excuse me, other countries of getting the access into the back door of the United States? Is that why he's moving into Gaza, to show a foothold saying, hey, look, I'm here. You're not going to step in. You're not going to no one's going to grab control of us. And if that happens to be the case, we'll just step in and take it ourselves. Is that why? Because that's what I'm thinking of. I don't have anything to back this, question up, but that's why I'm asking. Like, is that what it looks like?
So, so yes and no. So I'll explain. One is there's, as far as protecting a lot of these countries and the resources, absolutely. If we go back to the conversation earlier, I said, our country, and when I say our country, I'm talking about the government in collaboration with the deep state international crime syndicate. What have we been doing all across the globe, or the flat earth, whatever you believe in? We've been doing regime changes in order to take control of resources. We did it in the Congo, we did it in Venezuela, like we've done it everywhere. And so one of the scenarios that I've played out is to what you're talking about, somebody else coming in. If another entity was able to come in and establish peace between Palestine and Israel, that would essentially remove America out of that equation, even temporarily, and allow collaboration there to exist, which would have a lot of global support behind it, especially through the UN and the international syndicate and the deep state. And so that would be a non-kinetic way of trying to regain access to that software with Israel. So yes, I do agree that by Trump strategically positioning us as being the overwatchers of what's going to happen in Gaza, it prevents somebody else from coming in to take that position of authority. But I don't think like that's the main concern there. I truly think, um, and I know this won't be popular with a lot of people because we don't want, our troops everywhere else. I'll say this: I don't want endless wars, and I don't want World War III, but I also understand how ruthless the deep state is. When you've gotten to see reports and video of what the cartels will do and what MS-13 will do, I'll tell you guys right now, that shit will keep you up for the rest of your life. And knowing that these people do it with no hesitation to kids, like the most innocent, to see these people torture a kid, that lets you know what you're up against. So we will have kinetic conflicts. I strongly believe it won't be done in the form of endless wars or World War III. But what I do think we should do and should be a part of is, and I'm completely against being the world police, but I do think that we have a fundamental responsibility and obligation to every nation that we help facilitate regime changes to go and make sure that the people, the populace of those nations, have the ability to institute a government however they see fit. Doesn't have to be democratic, it doesn't have to be a republic, but however those nations see fit, we have to make sure that we undo the mess we did so these people have a fair chance at legitimate governments and legitimate sovereignty, so that the deep state can't ever come back in and repeat what we've done. So I think even though I know a lot of people are in support, this is going to finish up your question, Sarge. Even though you're going to see a lot of entities get behind Trump because that is their motive, what you articulated, they truly do have that motive. Ultimately, they're not going to get that because you're going to see global sovereignty take place once the deep state's eradicated.
Thank you,
So,
Albert. Oh,
sorry,
go
I
ahead,
just
Sergeant. Go ahead.
one super quick question. So this isn't going to be looked at to everybody as an offensive move. It's going to be looked at to everybody else who doesn't know how to pay attention to everything. It's probably going to look like an offensive move to everyone, but to us, it looks like a defensive move. Like hey, I am in the ring with all of you. See me here. Let's not play games. That's the way I look at it.
100%. The operatives on here are going to sell it as completely not just an offensive move, but they're going to sell it as an unnecessary offensive move, or they're going to sell it as an offensive move that was dealt because of incompetence. Like that's the narrative that they're going to try to push.
Oh, okay. So articles of impeachment from the crazy left. Got it.
Yes, actually, you brought up a good point. I almost forgot to address this. Um, the two ways that they remove Trump, because I've been trying to gameplay this, like they need this man out of office. So how is it? Well, one is the easy one that you can all guess because they've already tried to do it twice. They're going to try to do it again. The second one is through impeachment. So one of the things that they can, because remember, in order for them to be able to do impeachment, you have to get the GOP to sign off on this. You got to get the conservative politicians to sign off on it, and conservative politicians know that that is the end of their career if anybody stands against Trump. There's only one thing that could save them, and that's if they're able to facilitate the narrative that we're on the brink of World War III. Some major things have happened and they are able to sell it as incompetence. If they can do that and provide enough of a narrative, that would actually give the GOP the ability to do the articles of impeachment. And I'll tell you right now who would lead that. And this is going to piss a lot of people off, and you can be mad at me, but you can apologize later. Thomas Massey will be the one that heads that. And so just understand that when if they are able to pull it off the way they want, you're going to see these articles of impeachment be drawn up to say that, you know, we just and this goes back. There's a lot of different ways that this can happen. Remember, I said this is the USS Liberty playbook. But what did Israel learn from the USS Liberty? That it immediately showed them as a suspect. So if they have to adapt and overcome. So the new quote 2.0 of the USS Liberty would be something that would see a major attack on a US vessel or US troops, but you would also see simultaneously a major attack on something that's an Israeli vessel or an Israeli strong point where literally they would kill their own people to sell the narrative. Well, see, this wasn't us like it was then because look, we lost people too. And I think that's kind of how they would probably try to kick off World War III with Iran.
Thank you, Alpha. Thank you, Sergeant. All right, let's see. Who do we have? Genre. Your mic is unmuted. Go ahead.
And also, can you guys go a little quicker? Because Alpha, we respect his time. He's obviously on his way out soon. So go a little faster. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I assume you're talking about me. Yeah, my name is Jared. It's a weird name, so don't feel bad for getting it wrong. But yeah,
I apologize.
that's okay.
Me too.
It's okay. It's a weird name. My mother gave me that one. But anyway, but yeah, I was going to ask Alpha a quick question about this one because he more or less covered a lot of the points I was going to bring up because I work at a university and I'm very openly conservative in spite of that, being faculty, and it's the emotional tactics that they use. One thing that I found is very useful when dealing with them is being a mirror, because there is an FBI agent as well as an Interpol terrorist negotiation officer named Chris Voss. Very effective. And that's just being a mirror. And what happens is when somebody says something absurd, just repeat it back to them so they have to hear their own words. It makes them a lot more self-conscious. Is one little thing I would like to add on there for a tactic when dealing with absurdity. But to actually ask the question here, My concern, Alpha, is that it doesn't matter if it's APAC or if it's BP or some other foreign corporation that's lobbying Congress. I think that in general, I don't see us getting out of these forever wars or just nonstop war if there's constant foreign interference when it comes to donating to politicians. I think that's going to be very tricky for Trump to overcome if lobbying from outside of the United States or on behalf of other nations is going to keep going on, or other corporations globally. Do you think that he's going to be able to overcome that? Because that's a real concern of mine. Because APAC alone gave 126 million just last year alone.
He doesn't have a choice. Like he can make elections as fair as he wants, which is what we need. But if they're still lobbying in, APAC and these sorts that are involved, then we're right back to NASCAR races with all these politicians. So he doesn't have a choice. And the latest executive order that he pushed out there to start removing this funding in there, granted he's saying foreign, but I think that's showing a step in the right direction. I know a lot of people have said, well, this is directly going to affect APAC. That's not necessarily true, because APAC is sold as a domestic operation, hence why Big Bobby wanted to have them register as FARA, because then that would have sufficed here. So now, what the details of that law looks like, because he did put some verbiage in there that I found very interesting, where he said directly or indirectly. So that means even if it's a domestic contributor, if that money's coming in through proxy, then there's still an issue there. So I think he left some room to leverage there, in case he's not able to pull this off as fast as he wants. But I think this also kind of goes into the conversation of saving Israel for last, that even though he isn't specifically targeting APAC, if all of a sudden you see the revelations of what the Israeli government's been involved with, this is going to be the court of public opinion that's going to pressure Trump to be like, well, you need to have either APAC, register as FARA, or just completely remove them anyways. So we'll have to watch it to see how it plays out, but I think he's at least indicating to us that those are his intentions.
Roger that. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
All
Thank you. I
right.
appreciate
All
you.
right, Miss Sally. Go ahead, Sergeant.
Oh no, I was just saying thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Sally, go ahead. Your mic is unmuted.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, Alfie, I've been trying to figure out this angle with what you just mentioned with registering as an agent. Because I don't know, I'm sure that most of you guys know that they don't just lobby our politicians, they go through the various NGOs. When they were trafficking the children across the border, they weren't lobbying the politicians, they were paying these NGOs to act in behalf of them, right? So when he put that verbiage in there indirectly, that is important language. And I'm sorry that Charlie and Chris were not in that space last night. Oh my gosh. They won't even let you, as soon as you were making a great point, because I went in there, they cut you off and don't let you finish. And then they spin off some nonsense that makes zero sense. So I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that space if it was recorded, because that was fascinating. I didn't really have a question, but Alpha, I don't know if you could expand more on the NGO angle.
No, 100%. What JJ Carroll, exposed for us on Spaces and in podcasts with Catholic Charities and Jewish Family Services, and just, I mean, we not millions, not billions, but breaching $1 trillion, like that's major money. Like, if you go and you put that number on paper, you'll see how long it would take you just to write it, right? If you can even do it in a lifetime. I don't think you can. But everything has to get eradicated. I mean, a lot of people want to shit on our Constitution and say, see, it didn't work. And that's not true, because fundamentally it's been compromised almost from day one. So this experiment of America has never really even gotten an honest chance to be the experiment of America, because right away the claws of the deep state got into it, and government ran away with it. So at the end of the day, and I don't know what this looks like, but at the end of the day, the only solution to fix our country and to enforce the Constitution is not the World Economic Forum reset, but like a legitimate reset of shrinking the size of our government, which we see Doge in collaboration with Trump doing that now, is having these fair elections. Because what's going to happen, the major impact is when you see the actual people that people are voting for elected, we're actually going to get to see what the face of this country really looks like. Is California really red or is it blue? You know, is New York really red or is it blue? When we actually have legitimate people in office, because that's who the people voted for, then you're going to see the demographics of this country change, because there are going to be some areas that are legitimately blue, and people will realize this is what this is legitimately like, and I'm going to want to relocate. And you're going to see a migration of people in America moving to areas that truly represent them, and that's actually going to be the honest, like, look of this country. And you're, as we see that in the people, you're also going to see this in the government. And I think that's where we're going to see, where you're going to tell people we're not okay with NGOs anymore. We're not okay with the government, overstepping its bounds on education, on our body autonomy. Like, we're going to see the true reflection of what that looks like. But it starts back off at what the professor was saying. You know, we we got to get this back to something that's honest, and Trump has to remove all this, foreign money and domestic money that's getting money through proxy of foreign entities anyways.
Thank you, Alpha. Thank you, Sally. All right, Russ, you can go next, and then Chris, we will round it out with you, my friend. Go ahead, Russ.
Hey everybody, I'm new to Spaces. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Loud
we
and clear.
can.
All right. Yeah, I believe all this exposure stuff can't be rushed because it's conditioning people to, or the public to realize and understand what's coming next. With this MS-13 stuff leads to things coming this summer with Seth Rich and so on and so on. And I just, I have full faith in full control, and I see it coming. Like, we're going to have a busy summer, and I'll end it there.
Any thoughts, Alpha?
It's gonna be this summer is gonna be hot. um you guys got to look at it like this, right? Is we're all None of us are in the command center with Trump. None of us are. And even the sources we have, some are closer to the center of the onion than the other. But at the same time, we're using our experience, the information, historic data. But even with the historic data, it's very hard to gauge something, because the historic data, to a point, has also been manipulated, which is why a lot of these people who are listening to quote unquote economic experts, you're only an expert to the information you've been trained to be an expert on, because the stock market's been manipulated from day one. So you're not truly an expert because you've never truly seen an honest stock market. So that concept applies to what we're seeing here. I'll say this, a quick little story. When I was working for the school district fighting for my detective job back, they positioned me as their gang officer because of my background. And so when the district manager hit me up and he says, "Hey man, you got to do something with this gang problem in the schools." I said, "Okay, well, here's my question. Do you want me to come up with a legitimate operational format to deal with this problem? Or are you just wanting me to come up with something because you guys are going through the motions because you're looking for funding? Because I need to know how much of myself I'm going to invest into this program." And they're like, "No, we want a legitimate operation." I said, "Okay, so then that's how I'll build it." So, and it'll make sense to where I'm going with this. There are plenty of gang programs in school districts throughout this country. So you could easily just adopt one from another place. One of the programs known as the GREAT program is one that's been adopted by a lot of the larger school districts in this country. The issue, though, is these programs are only successful at the moment that they're implemented. You got best you got is a year or two with these programs. Why? Because a gang is a living entity. So once it sees what's been presented to it, it adapts to that to overcome the program you created, rendering that program ineffective. So me recognizing this, It was, okay, so how do I develop a program that's a living program that can adopt to the changes of the gang for as long as it goes. So as the gang changes, the program's able to change. And so I dialed in this very sophisticated program that was still something that would be able to be adjusted far beyond my absence. Something, back to, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Well, that same concept is what Trump and this operation is doing as well. You're dealing with a living entity. It's not a static enemy. It's an enemy that's going to adjust to everything. And it's in such a much larger scale, religiously, spiritually, educational, ideological, geopolitical, military, you know, biowarfare, like everything. And so as we see things, and a lot of times we'll make an interpretation to something saying, hey, it looks like it's going to play out this way. And it doesn't play out this way. Something else happens, but that something else is a benefit to us. That doesn't necessarily mean that, influencers, pundits, content creators got it wrong. It means that they actually did their job. It means the information that was pushed to them to push to the public was done so because there was a desired effect. And when that desired effect manifested itself, it forced the deep state to adjust to it, rendering a different solution, which is what the good guys wanted to begin with. And so when you look at this 5D chess that everybody, 5D chess, trust the plan. Yeah, trust that there is a plan, but we all have a responsibility to do our part. And nobody ever wants to say that part. They just want to box us in. So just have a fundamental understanding that we're dealing with a fluid operation. And my interpretation of the statement, you know, the military is in control or we are in control, means that they're in control of that ultimate red button. That if the deep state got pushed into the corner saying, poof, the whole entire ship's going down, they have the ability to subvert that. Everything in between is going to be a war, and wars aren't pretty, and there's real casualties in war.
Yeah, that isn't that the truth for sure. We're seeing that I mean, we're seeing it on real time, everybody. All right, Chris, we're going to take you as the last question. I know Alpha said 20 minutes ago. He had to go about 45 minutes ago. So Alpha, we got one more question for you from Chris. So go ahead, Chris.
Yes, I wanted to talk to Alpha about this. He'll like this. So first of all, MS-13, they're not gang members, or we'll have some people say on X, it's just a drug dealer. They're terrorists. That's exactly what they are. So if you don't believe they're terrorists, go back to the 90s. Bill Clinton, he deported 20,000 of them. Nobody likes to talk about that. The left's not going to talk about that. The woke right's not going to talk about that. I think it was even more than 20,000, but you'll find several sources that will tell you that Clinton did, in fact, deport 20,000 MS-13 gang members. So also with Tren de Aragua, a lot of evidence right now is showing that they're state-sponsored. So it leads even more to calling them terrorists because they're being backed by the government with funding. And so if they're being backed with the government with funding, then those are terrorists. All these gangs are terrorists, whether they're cartels, whether they're MS-13 or Tren de Aragua. They're here to destroy all of us. So that is the definition of a terrorist. I want to go to this Atlantic story real quick to talk to Alpha about that. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Liz Crokin, but she had a great post, which I put up the other day. So first of all, the Atlantic was behind this Russia hoax, right? I think a lot of people forget that because our news moves so quick. But they were also behind a story that claimed there was no sex trafficking related to Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein. They actually put out a story saying that it was a made-up story, that it never happened. And she put that up in the post, and the managing partner of the Atlantic is actually really close friends with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was found guilty in a federal court. So if anybody takes the Atlantic story and just decides to run with it, without having any facts, without looking at the timestamps involved, then they're just a fool. And we had an influencer on here with over 100,000 followers that I took on. Actually told everybody that he felt like it was subversion by Michael Waltz and called for his resignation. more than 72 hours ago when we didn't even have any of the facts. That, my friends, is an operation. That is not an opinion. That is an operation for clicks, impressions, and likes, to undermine the U.S. government, to undermine the entire Trump administration, to undermine us as Americans. And what you got to understand is they just want to stall everything out. They want a Pete Hegseth to, step down. They want a Michael Waltz to step down. They want us to have to confirm new people with a close vote. They want everything to come to a grinding halt. You got to look at this deeper. Don't just see a story and think it's real. It's not real. It's an invention. It's a leftist operation. That's what it was. Back to, how things are currently. We live in a feudal system. We have lords and we have serfs. And don't take this offensively, but we're all serfs. And if you listen to Steve Bannon, every now and then he'll make some really good points. And one of the points he made up was, in the information age, we're the most educated group of serfs that has ever existed in human history. Because of the speed of information, because of the access of information, we know a lot about what's going on and before the media, right? So what we have to do is take that information, arm ourselves with it, and affect real change for the people. And one last thing. One of the other plots was this whole Thomas Massey worship. I have nothing against Massey as a congressman. And whether you agree or not with Trump coming at him, some people do, some people don't. That's not really the point. The point is what you saw after that. People were blasting Trump, and that's their prerogative, right? They didn't agree with it. Fine, you have an opinion. But when you start calling for Thomas Massey to be president in 2028, I think that's what Alpha was alluding to, right? Because I saw several influencers saying, watch what's going to happen. Thomas Massey's going to run for president in 2028. And they're trying to tell you that this guy's a presidential candidate. He's just not a presidential candidate. He's just not. And he's not polished in that way. I don't have anything against what he's trying to do in some respects. He's a true conservative. He's really just a fundamental libertarian, right? That just doesn't want, to pass any bills involving money. He's got this ticker he carries around with him on the national debt. I get it. I mean, that's what he is. But that was another movement to undermine Trump and undermine our country. So you just got to look
Thank
at
you.
the deeper. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chris. I thought you were done. I was just saying thank you.
No, you just got to look at the deeper elements at play here. And you got to understand what's going on. And you got to understand that people are trying to overthrow everything in the first 100 days. And with Trump, they're either going to try to politically assassinate him or actually assassinate him. Look at history, right? They politically assassinated Richard Nixon. They tried to actually assassinate Reagan twice. In fact, one of the bullets, if the Secret Service hadn't acted so quick, he would have been dead. So understand what we're up against. You can go way back in time and look at it, and it's a real threat. And what Alpha was saying is absolutely true.
Thank you,
They will
Chris.
do anything they can to assassinate him politically or actually.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
All right. I think Alpha needs to go. He said he needed to go for about 45 minutes ago. He had 20 minutes left. So everybody, I want to say thank you for being here. Santino, I think you wanted to say something on Alpha. If you want to do some closing statements,
Yep.
go for it.
I just want to be really quick. I want to thank Alpha for coming here and having the time to educate us and give us awareness of what's really happening. And, I think that July 4th this year is going to be a really hot summer. And I think all your eyes are going to have to be on July 4th. I think a lot of stuff is going to be happening, i.e., Panama, Greenland, Canada. I think it's going to be a little different this year. So get ready yourself. I'm get ready. You guys are going to see some stuff happening. I really believe that. And I first said it.
Thank you, Santino. All right, Alpha. Anything you want to say to close it out?
Yeah. Never be ashamed of saying, God bless America. As a matter of fact, let God bless America flood your timeline because it will trigger the people that hate America. Because if you love America, that won't trigger you. So if you want to trigger the people that hate our country, put God bless America. Absolutely appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to have some time with you guys. And for those listening in the tunnels, I hope you learned something. Come at me, because I ain't going nowhere. So put a post up in the nest. Kind of gives people good information on positions that you'll be attacked in when you get into these spaces. And if it can help you, it'll help you. Oh,
Thank-
and the last thing that I'll say too, Jen, the United States Army, 4th Psychological Group, 8th Psychological Group, and Command Center, they've put out Ghost of the Machine 1, Ghost of the Machine 2, and Irregular Warfare. And in these videos, they're showing you how we're everywhere, right? Media, movies, radio, cartoons, text. They didn't say that to scare you for you. They said they're there because there's an enemy presence that's there to do it to you. So they're there to combat that. So if the United States Army is telling you in real time that there's psychological irregular warfare taking place, you better believe that it's happening and be prepared to deal with it.
Thank you, Alpha, and everybody. Alpha, he comes on the show. We try to get him on pretty often. So he obviously, as you guys know, he is busy doing his stuff over there as well. But he does join us often. So we will get him back on here, everybody. As you know, he's got a lot of great information. So I want to say thank you guys for being here once again. If you guys came in late to this, this will be up on the podcast host as well as my social media. So watch for that. I did put Rubber Ducks podcast on my feed here, so if you guys want to check it out, go check it out. It was an awesome podcast with Rubber Duck today. It was absolutely hilarious. So check it out, everybody, and watch for the show lineup for next week. God bless you all. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you soon. Thanks, Alpha. Thanks, Santino, and thank you again, everybody, for being here. God bless America.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.